listeners, welcome back to the Talkoffamepod Podcast for Kylie And today we're welcoming host of Lifetips Podcast, podcast consultant and influencer Nate Jones. Welcome to the podcast, Nate. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, and hello to the listeners and to the YouTube audience as well.
Yeah, so what began you to start your podcasting and teaching career?
Wow. So I started my podcasting journey in 2019 after the open mic world kind of, I guess, broke my interest in, going. Essentially, the timeline I had was capped. And so I'm like, I can't get all my points out in this little tiny bit of time. And so at that time in 2019, a then friend of mine told me about what used to be called the Anchor platform. And I got on there. And of course, now it's called Spotify for podcasters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a good long 6-ish year ride. And I just wanted a space where I could talk and, share my thoughts on things and really dive into stuff and not get capped. So I started my podcast in 2019, called it Life Tips. And relationship improvement with advice and tips on becoming a better you. And I think one of the reasons I chose that was because in 2019, I had experienced a horrible first date gone wrong. And so I wanted to tie that into just talking about family, friends, and different things I was actually experiencing in life that ultimately mattered more than, stuff that's on your resume that you do in life. So that's what I geared the show to. And as for the education world, I actually started that in 2022 last year. And I work in the kitchen, though. A lot of people think I'm a teacher. I'm not. I'll talk about that later. But I work in the kitchen, and it's still great to be connected to the school system somewhat and actually be able to see what goes on beyond, the actual scope of your job. You actually get to peek into the actual school system that exists now compared to what it existed, before. So that's kind of how things started with, the platform and also the career in education.
Like I know, like when a lot of people probably hear about education, I know probably people think like, oh, you have to be a teacher or something. But I know, like when they say like, oh, you're like working in a kitchen, that's honestly like the behind the scenes of the education, though, right? Like the
Hmm.
students and their teachers, like that's like the best part of it. Like it's like
Right.
kind of an easy part.
It kind of sort of easy part, just the the kitchen gets hot and there's no air conditioning back there, but it's fun, get to interact with coworkers and your supervisor, and you really get to do an important job, which is make food for the kids and feed the
Mhm.
kids at the right proper time. And I've worked in elementary schools, I've worked in middle schools, and in high schools. So I've been at all three levels, and I can tell you firsthand it's not as much work with middle school and high school as it is with the little babies in elementary school,
Yeah.
because you've got to make the food from the food to the back end stuff, because they get the food, but they also get the fruits and the veggies and the snacks. All that stuff has to be cut up into tinier pieces so they can
Mm.
actually eat it, because you're dealing with pre-K through fifth grade students. But when you go up in the education world to middle school and high school, it's a little bit easier. You can just hand them the apple, or, let them pick out what they want. It doesn't have to be cut up into little tiny pieces because you're dealing with nearly grown adults at that point. So Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of work. It's rewarding. And it literally is one of the best career paths out there. I say education and the government are the top two best career paths out there because
Oh
they
yeah,
never die out.
definitely. Like, what is like your favorite like level to work on? Like, do you have, like elementary better or high school, like pre-K type of things? Like, do you have like a personal kind of thing you prefer to work on?
Whew. Um, from a from a work standpoint, it's easier to work, with middle school and high school because of actually what you're doing. But from a connection standpoint, I would say that elementary school is like the best because they're little kids and they gravitate towards you like you're their parent, and it's just the most amazing feeling when you've got a little kid, who wants you to be there for them. And then of course you get uh the super smart fifth graders who are like 10, 11, and they blow your mind with all
Oh
the
yeah.
stuff that, they talk to you about and the stuff that they go through. And it's just like, even something as simple as, you know, showing you the new iPhone they got. And then you think back to your own childhood. It's just like, really, parents, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So yeah, elementary school is amazing. I'd have to say elementary
Mhm.
school out of all the branches.
Yeah, because like with like people in elementary school, like the kids are just so adorable. Like they're like we're seeing little kids just walking around chatting. This is like it's so adorable.
Right.
And like you are the host of the Life Tip podcast, like you mentioned
Hmm.
earlier, where your listeners will learn to critically think about the relationships and the decisions. Like, how has like this show kind of developed you connections and friendships?
Mm. So when it comes to that, it's been a very interesting journey considering that the world shut down in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to say that if the world hadn't shut down the way it did, I wouldn't have gone to such heights that I was able to. It started out slow in 2019, but once we got around like the March April time frame and the world actually did shut down, that's when I really started meeting people in the podcast world, connecting with people because that's all we could do was get up
Yeah.
and turn our computers on and turn our phones on and access social media all day and FaceTime people. And that's all we could do was connect with people through our devices. And then the people that we lived with, we saw them every day. We didn't get to
Mm-hmm.
see people again until the next year in
Yeah.
2021 when things started getting better. But it benefited me in that the podcast blew up because people were home and that's all they could do was like listen to people to get access to the world. So my show was just like it skyrocketed during the pandemic, and I was able to actually reach a greater audience. Like my listeners, the numbers were going from 100 to 200 to 300 like per month, and so it was crazy the amount of downloads the show was getting. And then just meeting people, podcast groups on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, like the whole nine yards. Every day it was someone new, someone fresh, and
Mm-hmm.
it just snowballed into a bunch of, I'll say, long distance relationships because
Yeah.
most of the people that I met live in different states, live in different areas of the world. Not that many people actually were from my own vicinity, except for one, and I'll mention that later. But yeah, it opened up a lot of avenues. And so to this day, when it comes to business connections, podcast appearances, I've been on like 30 plus platforms since 2020. and it helped launch my speaking career. And so here we are now, just 2023, grateful for the people that I've met, even through other non-podcast means like Clubhouse. Oh my goodness. Cannot tell you how many people I met on Clubhouse in the beginning when it first started. Of course, it's a it's boring now, but back then in the pandemic time, it was on fire. Everybody was there, everyone was using it. Met a bunch of people, developed some relationships from there, who have all sadly gone their separate. We've all gone our separate ways at this point, but there's literally was no limit to the relationships I could develop through the show, through the world being in the state that it was, and so I just took advantage of it.
Like that's like the problem with like pandemic is like when you do podcasting, especially when the pandemic started. I didn't start this podcast until in 2021, once kind of things started kind of, a little bit opening up again. But it's
Hmm.
like when you do podcasting, especially during the pandemic, like it's just like everyone's listening to it. Podcasts,
Hmm.
like everyone's listening to something different because like everyone's stuck at home and they didn't have anything to do. And like BC couldn't leave the house. Like I know a lot of people like even 2021 were still afraid to leave the house due to restrictions, afraid of getting COVID and or
Hmm.
whatever that reason may be. It's just like no one could do nothing. Like it's just like when during the pandemic, the only people I saw were the family I lived with and my best friend that lives a couple houses down from me. And that's really the only people I saw during that time was my best friend and my family that I live with. Is that like when I talk to my family that I haven't seen in a long time due to pandemic, I would FaceTime them or maybe join a Zoom meeting like me and you were doing and talk with them for hours. Is that like now it's just like you reflect back on it like how did we get through this time without seeing the people that we love? Or how did we kind of survive it?
I think that for the most part, we survived it because of technology and because of the graciousness of our providers. Um, Apple, like every single every single Apple keynote, they put a huge emphasis on their phones and the software. And that got a lot of people through the pandemic because we were able to FaceTime, and we basically everything's free on Wi-Fi. So because we were all home on Wi-Fi, we were just FaceTiming and iMessaging like crazy. The amount of the group chats that blew up during the pandemic, it was like just ding, 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 ding. Your phone wouldn't stop going off because everyone was trying to communicate with you. And um, even with AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, whoever you have, they were so gracious. They were like, okay, we know the world is in shutdown mode and money isn't coming in like it should be, so we're going to give people grace on their phone bills. And that's exactly what they did. And so we survived because the people that provide us what we need and what we have showed us grace and mercy during a time where things were difficult, and only brought us back to a sense of normalcy when the world went back to normal in 2021. And so just that reliance on technology and our devices to keep us connected, and then just even having faith in the relationships that we built with people before the pandemic, those relationships now had to be grown in a different way so that when the world came back to being normal, somewhat normal, it'll never be completely normal, but somewhat normal, those relationships that you made in 2019 before the world shut down, you have the chance to now grow them to much stronger depths, so that when you come back into the real world and you can see them again, it's like no time has passed. And then you also get to just be like, hey, let's go kayaking and boom, you go kayaking and you're able to regain what you had before, but also there's no love lost because you kept things going during the time where we were on lockdown. So I would say that's how we survived. And then of course, faith.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone clung to their faith like crazy when the pandemic hit. And that's a good part of why we're still here today. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure on that. Like a lot of people just relied on technology and faith to make them happy. I know like with technology, I was on my phone like crazy, talking to my friends and family, making sure they're okay. Like I would spend most of the time on FaceTime with friends or family for hours, just chatting, having a great time. Is it like we weren't used to doing that? Like we were used to going outside and seeing our friends and family every single day and doing our activities that we're really used to doing every single day. But then, like, once the world shut down, we're like, what are we supposed to do? Like, this is like, how are we supposed to live like we're used to? And like, he's like, the only thing we can do is go on our phones, talk to our family, or even watch television. Like, television went up
Mhm,
and skyrocketed as well. Like, for me,
mhm.
especially, I was watching TV so much. Even though, like, during the pandemic, like even with watching so much TV, you're like, why am I watching so much TV? But then it's like, where are we? What else are we supposed to do? Like during this time, we have to do nothing.
Yep. Yep. Thank God for streaming services.
Oh yeah, and like, what is like a life tip? Like if, for the people listening that
Mhm.
should know, like, what is like a life tip you people should they know from your perspective?
Mm. I would have to say just embrace embrace fame. Embrace fame.
Mm-hmm.
Because if y'all don't know, the whole bio for Kylie's show says that fame is being your truest self, your best self, and letting that shine. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would say. Just embrace fame, embrace who you are, and tell people about, tell people your story. A lot of times we don't like to talk about ourselves. We don't like to tell our story, not
Mm-hmm.
knowing that your story could be the one thing that somebody else actually needs to hear. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. He's like when you share your story, like you do not know how many people are going through the exact same thing you're going through. Even though like at the time or in the moment you're like, who's gonna resonate with my story or why should I share it? But then like when you like talk about it to someone or even start a podcast or go on someone's podcast and say like, oh, I went through this or I went through that that listener your fans that are listening to that episode might actually think like, oh, he went through that? I had no idea. That makes me love him even more. Because like if you share your story, like it's just like it's gonna be better for you to kind of get out in the open. It is and make you kind of less worry about how you're feeling.
right, right. That part is key as far as,
Mm-hmm.
people not knowing that what you're going through is exactly what they're going through because we all need to we all need to know there's hope. And I think that's something that's definitely something that I can provide with my own story. It's just like there's hope. There's a bunch more to my story that I'll share later, but even just in my own birth reality. Wow, let's see, get these months right. I was born 4 months before I was originally supposed to be born.
Oh, really?
Yep. So I was a little tiny 1 pound 7 ounce kid, and I came out, and you know you could hold me in your hand, and I had so many complications. Like the life expectancy was getting lower and lower by the day, and uh, but eventually, uh, eventually 6 months later, I did come home, and here we are, almost 29 years later. So, um,
Ooh.
just even sharing that story is just it's mind blowing to think about that. I don't remember it, but it's mind blowing to think about that that happened. And
Mhm.
even now, it's just like going back to the NICU uh, in DC to visit some of these families and see their babies. It's just like, well, I made it.
Mhm.
Your kid can make it too. So, um, talking about testimonies and sharing your story, that's literally
Mhm.
just one of the best things about my story that people don't really know about.
Yeah, like I was the same way as well. Like I was born 1 month. Me and my brother were born 1 month before our due date. Because I have a twin brother, so me and him were originally due a month later. We were born in September, then our due date was October. But then, like when we were born, my brother was actually like in the NICU, like he had some complications or something. But I turned out perfectly fine. But like with my brother, like I think he has some complications. I have no idea. Like it's just like with some things, like when you are born early, you do not know like what's gonna happen if you're born early and stuff.
Yeah, you really don't. All you know is what was told to you when you got older about how it actually went down. And wow, just the fact that we could have had the same birth month. Wow. But
Hmm.
yeah, because yeah, October is my birth month. So,
Oh.
but ironically, September is my mom's birth month. So, perfect timing there. But the fact that you and your brother were born like that close to each other is just like wow. And he made it through all the complications of birth and is still here. That's just a testament to like just how that's just a testament to how crazy awesome it is to have faith and to
Hmm.
know that someone out there is keeping you alive when everything else around you is trying to kill you. So yeah, that's just all God right there. So
It's
yeah,
all
I'm
him.
impressed with that story. It's just like wow. And so we get deeper into as we get deeper into the show, we talk about relationships. Um, I'm definitely intrigued, to see how much more, in common our stories line up almost.
Like I know like with many stories, like a lot of people have many things in common when you don't realize. Like whether it's like your birth story or how you started out podcasting, like you never know.
Right.
Like how has like your guests or you shown get critical thinking about relationships and decisions? I know you just kind of talked about like it before.
Right. I would like to think that I'd like to think that my listeners take what I have to say seriously, but also with a grain of salt because I don't have all the answers. I just have the answers that are based off my own experience. So I like to tell people that you can take or leave what I have to say on relationships. One thing I don't like and one thing I don't believe is that you have to have a length of experience in a particular area to be able to give advice and talk about stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just not true.
Yeah.
You can learn from anybody regardless of how long they've had certain experiences. Sure, I may have only dated twice, but I have had years of experiences with, dealing with people from a business and a friendship standpoint. So,
Mm,
and of course, family. So, just based off of that alone, you don't have to be in your 50s with, you know, all these years of experience to be able to actually have superiority over someone else that doesn't have less experience, or over someone else that doesn't have as much experience who has less. And I think that's a misconception that we can only learn from people who are older than us. No, that's a big misconception. You can learn from anybody. You just have to be willing to humble yourself and think about what is it that they know that I don't, that I could potentially, benefit from. So I
because
don't. Mhm.
if you learn something from someone, whether it's your family, friend, or loved one, you might learn something that you may never know. Like whether if you're in your 50s, 60s, or you're a teenager, someone is going to give you tell you something that you never knew or never heard of.
Right, right. And that's one of the reasons why I love this generation is
Mm,
because I'm learning a lot from them about how limitless, the possibilities are. You've got
mm,
23-year-olds, 20-year-old, like early 20-year-olds, people who are 8, 7, 9 years behind me, famous, all
yeah.
because of opportunities that they were given to ex- to explode and get better and create a life for themselves. Opportunities that my generation wasn't given as much. What do I mean by that? I just recorded a podcast episode recently about high school now versus high school when I was coming up. There's more podcast episodes coming out about those experiences. Um, but one of the biggest things that I talked about in those episodes was that unlike this generation, we had so many things. I was just watching Kim Possible the other day. We had High School Musical, the real High School
Yeah.
Musical, and I was in middle school when all the movies came out. So going
Mm,
into high school, I'm watching all the movies and I'm like, oh my gosh, Vanessa Hutchins, and I'm
yeah.
gonna meet a girl and sing my way to graduation and be a basketball star. None of that happened. None of
Yeah.
that happened. And then I get into the real school environment now, and it's like, oh, it's really not like that. Ooh,
Yeah, it's
well,
all virtual reality. It's all virtual reality.
right. So, but we had that. And nowadays, we sort of have that because there are young people whose lives have been transformed by being cast on High School Musical, the musical series, which, by the way, if you
Mm,
haven't seen that, watch it.
yeah,
It's good.
it's so
Um,
good.
but it just highlights the fact that things are different now. And this generation is doing things that are unprecedented. The amount of people who have gotten famous off TikTok,
Oh yeah.
even though the government is trying to ban the app, there are people whose careers have gotten started on TikTok, and
Hmm.
they may not be on TikTok as much, but because of TikTok, they've been able to ascend and climb the ranks. And so it's uncanny and unprecedented what this generation is doing now with fully baked everything. Whereas, back then in 07, 08, 09. Everything was just coming up, just
Mm.
developing. Everything was in its baby stage. But now, poof, y'all got everything. You don't need the traditional job path. You don't need the traditional school path. You can do that if you want to. But if you really think about it, all you got to do is just create something that you can profit off of. That's what people did during the
Mm.
pandemic. YouTube channels,
Mm.
podcasts. People blew up and got famous during the pandemic
Oh yeah.
because they had all that free time. They couldn't go back to work. And some people just decided, forget my job. I'm not going back to work. I'm going to do this and blow up and get famous. And I would say that the biggest example of this, and I'm not to keep the tangent going, but I do want to mention this. One of the most impactful platforms that has had a huge effect on both of our generations is OnlyFans. I know,
Oh.
I know, I know, I know. Um, that's a dicey arena to get into. A very dicey arena to get into. You gotta have a lot of, guts to start an OnlyFans channel
Mm.
because of the way it's marketed, because of the way it's viewed by people. I was just reading an article yesterday about an OnlyFans model whose stepdad was her number one customer. And I was like, yo, that's OC, that's out of control, that's wild.
I
Like
know.
wild. But yeah, if you're going to start an OnlyFans, I would just say be careful. It does give you the ability to make tons of money, but just be careful. But that's just
Yeah.
another example of how crazy things have gotten with the generations since, the pandemic, and just how different things are now. So I'm in awe of this generation, and in terms of my listeners and the advice I give them. It's just like, hey, like, do what you want to do, but also just know there's positive and negative repercussions, and I don't have all the answers.
No one does. That's how much this generation has changed. Because like with the technology, like when I was born, technology wasn't big. It was just like barely a thing. Like when High School Musical came out, I was born probably not even born when it was released. I was born the exact same year when the first High School Musical came out. And I didn't watch High School Musical until I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. And like I was obsessed with the Sims. Like during the pandemic, I had nothing to do, and I was literally watching and memorizing all the High School Musical dances because I was so bored and was like, I'm just going to memorize all High School Musical dances. I still remember
Mhm.
basically all of them to this day. I was just doing one a couple of weeks ago. Like it's just like that's how much technology and the pandemic really kind of changed the way we do things and the way we kind of live every single day.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
But
Yep.
like, how can people like think about like the relationships and like decisions?
So, ooh, that's a good one. So, I would just say, first of all, you can't choose your family, but you can choose your friends. The
Mm-hmm.
family you were born into is the family you were born into. You're stuck with them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no getting around that. So, whatever your family dynamic is, though, that you can change. You can't change the family you have, but you can change the dynamics. So, if you weren't close growing up, you can be close as adults. Or if you were close growing up, then that'll make your adulthood better. Like,
Mm-hmm.
your brother were born right there, and now you all are adults, and your relationship may be great and it can get better, or it may have been hard at first and it got better. But regardless of where you two are at, you're his sister and he's your brother, and and you two will always have each other's backs, basically, regardless of where you all go in life. But then when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to friends, oh boy, this is where things get interesting
Yeah.
because having been homeschooled from pre-K to 12th grade, I already have been there and experienced what homeschooling is like. When the
Yeah.
pandemic came, people had to take their kids out of school and homeschool them. So the
Mm-hmm.
elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, when the world came back to some sense of normalcy in 2021, I would say, I don't know the actual number, but if I had to take a random guess off the top of my head, I would say that 50% of families went back to school, whereas the other 50% decided to continue homeschooling because they started homeschooling during the pandemic and just decided, we're going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked for me and both my siblings, and it worked. It's a great proven method of school. But there is one downside: the social dynamics. And for me in particular, I know that my social dynamics were even more difficult when I hit college. I went to Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I'll never forget being in my dorm. My roommate had not yet gotten there. He was coming the next day. So I was standing there in my dorm room looking outside my window. The family had just driven off to go all the way back up north, and it was the first day, and I'm standing at my window. The sister dorms are over here. The rest of campus is across the bridge, and I'm just like, this is what I missed out on. And the entire first year of school was academically bad, but socially great. But when I left and didn't go back, it was a big culture shock. And so now the what ended up happening was I learned more about diversity than I had ever learned before. I live literally in the heart of the DMV. And while DC is becoming more different and, diverse now, it I still lived in a very uh, set community. And so going to Liberty and having people from all walks of life be there is just amazing. I've gone back for multiple homecomings, and I'm pretty sure I'm going back this year in October for our 2023 homecoming. But it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
People from different walks of life, you get to see the world. And when you're in college, that's the time to expand your horizons
Mm-hmm.
beyond what you know, so that when you get out into the real world, you have a unique perspective on people that's not buried into one specific culture group. And that plays a huge, huge, huge part in relationship building. So when we talk about friendships specifically, what you want to look for are quality people who are authentic and genuine, just like you. The time of fake friends and all that, we're past that. But
Yeah.
I think what happened is when the pandemic actually came, I know I keep going back to the pandemic, but the pandemic literally is the big boom that changed everything when it comes to friendships. We
Yeah.
were so in sync during lockdowns,
Mm-hmm.
but when the world opened back up, for some strange reason, we forgot how to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff as simple as, hey, how are you today? Checking in on people, your FaceTimes, your phone calls, your, you know, building relationships, all that died out when the world went back to normal. And now we're back to making excuses why we can't meet up with people. Now we're back to being uber tired after work. Now we're back to just laziness when it
Yeah.
comes to friendships, when it comes to building with people. We're back to being scared again. Like, we had to do this when we were on lockdown. We had to meet people and verify that people were real and FaceTime and all that jazz. Now it's back to, oh, well, you could be a catfish. So, I'm going to just pass by you, and or I'm good with the group of people that I have in my life right now, but that group of people that you have right now is a clique holding you back from your true potential because all they want to do is keep you in the same pattern, the same cycle of mediocrity. That is why can't believe I'm about to say this. That is why Ja Morant keeps getting in trouble because he has not changed his circle of friends. They're the same people that roll up in clubs, roll up in cars, brandishing guns on Instagram, and when the NBA finds out and catches him, and he gets suspended like he's being suspended now with no pay, about to lose everything, it's all because you did not change your circle when you got famous. Because when you get that famous, you have to change your circle
Yeah.
100%. Because if you don't, it will destroy you. So when I talk to people about friendships, I just simply say, look, like, live your life as if you're a celebrity. Even though you're not, you don't have millions of, followers and a big, huge platform like Taylor Swift. Even though
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that, live your life as if you have that because you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be in a situation where one person or a group of people that are not for you could mess up your future and mess up where you're going. But also, you want to make sure that the people around you are solid people so that when you get to certain days, they will actually be the people that you call upon. I'll never forget. Well, probably not my uncle's wedding, but I'll never forget my sister's wedding, my older sister's wedding from 3, 4 years ago. Three people I know who are acquaintances just got married in the last 5 months of the year. My best friend is getting married later this year. My cousin's getting married next year. In every single case scenario with weddings, there's the wedding and the wedding reception. When you get to the wedding reception, even even in like your Love Is Blind and Put a Ring on It and Ready to Love, your reality TV shows, when you
Mm-hmm.
get to the wedding sequences, you automatically know that this happens. When you get to the reception and the father-daughter dances are done and all that jazz, the couple sits down at their table and a select few people come to a microphone and put them on blast. It's funny,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, that's the time where their closest friends, see where I'm going, people? That's the time where their closest friends say something about them. The bridesmaids and maid of honor and the groomsmen and best man, they all talk about their respective people. But they're not up there just for the sake of being up there. They're up there because they are the specific chosen friends from life of the bride and the groom that they trust to say something about them on the biggest day of their lives, which is
Mm-hmm.
their wedding day. If you don't take friendship seriously now, it will backfire when you get to those important moments. Wedding,
Mm-hmm.
birth of the baby, your housewarming party when you move out, the people video that Libyanka made, which her song is gold now, but that video was so key because it talks about it references friendships and people and how they don't really know you. She was waiting for people to show up to her apartment in that music video. No one came. Just a bunch of text messages of people canceling on her. That's real. And so, yeah, you got to take friendship seriously. I take friendship seriously. Like, who knows? I could befriend Kylie off of this whole thing. You never know.
Yeah, you
Like,
never
but
know.
I take friendship so seriously. Like, you've got to, because if you do take friendship seriously, then you'll have people that you can rely on for life when you're in situations that are inevitably going to come, like death of loved ones, or your family decides I'm going to move to Texas, and they leave you where you always grew up, and you've got that long stretch of distance. Those days are going to come, and when you can't be with your family, who are you going to rely on? God, your faith, yes, but you also need physical people with you to rely on, and that's where your friends, your real friends, come in to play. So
Mm-hmm.
long-winded, but that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, friendships, that's why friendships are just so important is that like when you're going through a situation like losing a loved one and don't have like it's like family there to support you because of course when you lose a loved one your family's also grieving as well and you also want to give them that space as well. So like when you are giving kind of your family that space, you want to go to that one friend, your best friend that's been there for you.
Mm,
So basically, how many years have been friends? Like my best friend, me and her have been friends probably about 78 years. And like me and her are basically neighbors. Me and her live a couple houses down from each other. And me and her have been tell each other everything. Like wherever we're having a bad day or upset about a situation, I'll text her and be like, hey, like, can I talk with you? Like I'm having a hard day and just kind of need someone to talk to. Because like when you have that one person that like is there for you to listen to you about having a bad day and just need someone to chat with, like that's definitely a true friend. And I'm definitely a person that like is there for anyone, even though I might not know them too well. I'm always gonna be there for that person. Because like, I might not know what they're going through at that time. Like even though I now might be best friends with them or might have the best relationship with that person, I'm still gonna be there for them, whether the situation is. Like these like that's just the way people are, is that like it's the way today's society is built, like they're like, oh, like I don't like that person. Like, why should I be there for him? Like, it's just like from my perspective, even though I might not like that person or might not agree with their views or the way they act, I'm still gonna be there for that person, even though I might not agree about what they do, or what action they did. Even I might not agree with it. It's just like I'm still gonna be there for them or listen to what they have to say, even though I might not agree.
right. The other thing that just popped in my mind that I almost forgot about is, where do you live? That's the question I want to ask you and your audience, not you specifically, but since we're talking about it, like, where do you live? Think about that, everybody. Where do you live? Y'all heard it before. Like, DC is literally 30 minutes away from me. I'm that close. Virginia is like 45 minutes, at least the starting point of Virginia is 45 minutes away from me. Further out in Virginia, it turns out to be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, et cetera, et cetera. But, where do you live? Like, I keep saying that because where you live and friendships plays a huge part in your world. in the way that you live life on this planet. I'll never forget visiting New York City in 2019 before the pandemic came. I'm going to go back. Trust me, I'm going to go back. I haven't been to New York in 4 or 5 years, but I need to go back because
Mm.
downtown and Broadway and, all of that was amazing. And it made me think, okay, could I survive living in a big city like this and waking up to it every single day? And I had to be honest with myself. Some answers were yes, other answers were no. The no's because, well, I heard from New York people that there's always a bunch of construction taking place at night when you're trying to sleep. And I'm just like, I would have to sleep with headphones on or AirPods in my ears. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. But then the positive part, obviously, is that you wake up and there's people everywhere. And your
Yeah.
friends are just, or your family or people are just like a minute away. You don't need a car. You just hop on a train or you walk downtown. Or now, of course, if you live in the outskirts and you're in upstate New York, yes, you need a car because the city's going to be like 30, 45 minutes away from you. But if you're in the city or you're somewhere close to it, you're good. Like,
Yeah, you're
you
good.
don't need to search, for friendships that much. And even, I know we haven't talked about dating relationships yet, but even from a dating standpoint, like, how far will you go? I can no longer long distance date, but I've long distance dated before. The only way that I will long distance date again is if God tells me to long distance date. Outside of that, I can't do it anymore. But I've done it. It's a lot. And but it opens you up to different people. So that's why I say, where do you live? Because we're talking about friendships and relationships, and eventually we're going to talk about dating. Where you live plays a huge part in the development of these bonds. If
Hmm.
you live in an area like I do, like I literally live right now as we're talking, where you have to drive places just to hang out. Stuff isn't close. You have to plan out things with different people and rely on a set schedule of social life, or what I like to call work life balance. It's tough, very tough,
Hmm.
especially when the majority of your relationships are all from different areas and you don't really have as many people here in your own hometown. So yeah, that plays a huge part in friendships, where you live and the people that are around you. And so I just applaud you, Kylie, even for mentioning that, of your best friend being just houses away from you. That is the type of relationship I always encourage people to have with people where Amazon and Alexa just want to go off today. So, yeah, just if you don't have friends in your hometown, you need to develop friendships, in your hometown, because you never know when you're going to need someone, not just for, oh, my car broke down and I need help. No, it could just be one of those scenarios that just happened to me. I got a "what are you doing" text message right as we're recording, and my best friend from work is literally 20 minutes away from me, and I know she wants to hang out, and I'm just like, well, after I'm done with this speaking engagement, it's raining outside. I don't want to go anywhere. People drive crazy in the rain. I love you, but I'm tired. I don't need to go to sleep. So yeah, friendships, where you live, key. But oh boy, when we get to talking about dating relationships, that's when I'm going to go off. But I'm going to hand it back to Kylie real quick.
Yeah, that's definitely well said. You said it perfectly. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know we're kind of like
Mhm.
running out of time here, but I just want to
It's
thank you
okay.
so much for coming on the podcast and taking time. You're such an amazing person, so inspiring. I'm so happy
Appreciate
you got
it.
to chat today. And thank you everyone for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone listens to this episode and learn something new. And make sure to rate, review, and subscribe and listen to the next episode of the podcast. It means so much. And thank you again, Nate, for coming on.
You're welcome, guys. And Kylie, I appreciate it. It's been great. And, we didn't get to talk about everything, but there's more of that on the show that you can listen to on hers and mine. So I
Mhm.
got y'all, and it was fun. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Mhm.